This day in time. What happened today, years ago?
Welcome. We're doing a deep dive today, looking through some really fascinating source material we've gathered.
Yeah, it all seems to cluster around one specific date, June 4th, but across, well, very different times and topics.
Exactly. So our plan is to unpack these sources, pinpoint the key events they highlight.
And try to figure out why these moments, politics, war, tech, are seen as such, pivotal turning points.
It's quite a coincidence, this date popping up like this. Let's see what connections, if any, we can find.
Okay, sounds good. Where do the sources start us off?
Right, the first one takes us back, late 19th century. A secret political deal on June 4th.
Ah, okay. So context-wise, we're talking late 1800s, the Ottoman Empire. It was weakening, right?
Yeah, definitely. Facing internal struggles and a lot of European intervention.
And Russia had just won the Russo-Turkish War, 1877-78. They were expanding south.
Which, understandably, made powers like Britain pretty nervous, especially about their interests in the Middle East.
And the route to India, presumably, that was always crucial.
Absolutely. So June 4th, 1878. The sources say Britain and the Ottoman Empire secretly signed the Cyprus Convention. Why Cyprus?
Well, the British were very worried about Russia getting too powerful in the Mediterranean.
Okay.
They needed a strategic spot, somewhere to keep an eye on things, protect that route to India, the jewel in the crown, as the sources put it.
And Cyprus was perfectly placed for that.
Yeah.
A key piece on the board.
Exactly. An island right there in the Eastern Med. Ideal from their perspective.
So what were the actual terms, this secret deal? What did it lay out, according to the material?
It's interesting, the sources mention this kind of double aspect. The Ottomans kept nominal sovereignty.
Nominal, meaning like in name only.
Pretty much, because Britain got full administrative control. They were actually running the place.
Ah, I see. And what did Britain give in return?
They promised military support if Russia threatened Ottoman territory elsewhere.
Yeah.
And they paid a symbolic sum, the Cyprus tribute.
So a technical owner, but a practical occupier. That sounds potentially tricky down the line.
You could say that. The sources really stress the long-term fallout.
What kind of fallout?
Well, first, the secrecy itself. It apparently shocked Europe and sort of set a pattern for British diplomacy.
Okay. Like operating behind closed doors.
Right. But more importantly, for the people on Cyprus, mostly Greek Cypriots, this marked the beginning of a really long period of instability.
How so?
The sources directly trace things like ethnic conflict, sovereignty disputes, geopolitical tensions that persist even now, back to this 1878 convention.
Wow. So one secret agreement, seemingly just about administration, could light a fuse that's still burning over a century later.
It really shows how these historical moments can have incredibly long shadows.
Okay, let's shift gears quite dramatically. Fast forward in time. A different June 4th, a very different kind of event. A battle.
Right. A huge one. June 4, 1942, the Battle of Midway.
Set the scene for us. What was happening in the Pacific theater of World War II at that point?
Well, Pearl Harbor had happened late in 41. And since then, Japan had achieved a string of, frankly, stunning victories. They were expanding rapidly.
But the sources note something had changed by Midway. The element of surprise.
Exactly. That was gone for the Japanese, at least for this operation. The Americans weren't completely in the dark anymore.
And that lack of surprise, the intelligence aspect, seemed absolutely critical for June 4, 1942, based on our material.
Oh, completely. The U.S. had pulled off a massive intelligence coup. They'd broken the main Japanese naval code, JN-25.
JN-25, so they knew what was coming.
They did. They knew the target was Midway Island, a really strategic spot, like a stepping stone between the U.S. and Asia.
So instead of just reacting, they could prepare. They knew where the punch was aimed, what actually happened on June 4th itself.
Japan launched its attack early that morning, aiming to seize the island. But the U.S. carriers, thanks to that intelligence, were lying in wait. Ambush position.
And the battle unfolded primarily in the air.
Yes. U.S. dive bombers found the Japanese carriers at a vulnerable moment. The sources emphasize the incredible impact of those attacks.
What was the damage?
Devastating. In just a few crucial minutes, they hit and fatally damaged 3 main Japanese carriers: Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu.
3, just like that.
Just like that. And later in the day, they located and sank the 4th, the Hiryu.
4 fleet carriers
Yeah.
in a single day. That's almost unbelievable.
It was an absolutely catastrophic loss for Japan's naval air power. The sources call it irreparable, really.
So, the result. What did Midway mean in the grand scheme of war, according to these sources?
It wasn't just stopping Japan's advance, though it did that. It fundamentally crippled their main offensive weapon, the carrier fleet. The sources are clear. This was the turning point in the Pacific War. It allowed the U.S. to go from defense to offense.
And it highlights something else too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The vital role of intelligence, of code breaking, but also technology and strategic flexibility in modern warfare, being able to use that information effectively.
It's an incredibly stark example, isn't it? How knowing the enemy's plan and being ready on that one day could literally change the direction of a global conflict.
Definitely. A single day of intense action with massive consequences.
Right, let's jump again. Another June 4th, another complete shift. Modern era this time. Tech and space.
Yes, moving much closer to our time. June 4th, 2010. And this involves SpaceX and the first launch of their Falcon 9 rocket.
SpaceX, Elon Musk's company. The sources mentioned their driving vision, what was it?
Well, yeah, founded back in 2002. Their goal wasn't just launching satellites, though that was part of it. The material points to this really bold ambition, making humanity multiplanetary. Mars was the big target.
Okay, a huge goal. How did Falcon 9 fit into that?
To even attempt something like that, you need reliable and crucially much cheaper access to orbit, something previously only governments could really afford to do.
So Falcon 9 was designed to be that cheaper, reliable way up.
That was the idea, named after the Millennium Falcon, from Star Wars. And the sources note it was developed with private funds, though NASA did provide support through the COTS program, Commercial Orbital Transportation Services.
What kind of rocket was it?
It's a two-stage rocket, uses liquid fuel, designed specifically to launch their Dragon spacecraft first for cargo to the ISS, the International Space Station, but always with the plan for astronauts later.
So why is June 4, 2010, the key date here?
That was its maiden flight, liftoff from Cape Canaveral in Florida. It successfully put a test version of the Dragon capsule into orbit.
And why was that specific launch such a big deal, according to the sources? What made it groundbreaking?
Because, as the sources emphasize, this was the first time a private company had designed, built, and successfully launched its own rocket into orbit.
Not a government agency, but a company.
Exactly. Up until then, that capability belonged solely to nations, to superpowers, really. This flight proved it was possible for the private sector.
And that opened the door for, well, a whole new era.
Completely. It paved the way for private companies becoming major players in space. And later, of course, Falcon 9 became reusable, which dramatically cut launch costs.
Right, the landing rockets. That was revolutionary.
Huge. It meant space wasn't just for government missions anymore. It fueled a whole commercial industry, satellites, station resupply, even space tourism eventually.
It's amazing to think that one launch on that day in 2010 really did signal the start of this massive shift in who gets to go to space and why.
Yeah, from government-led exploration to a much more dynamic, commercially driven field.
So looking back at these 3 June 4ths, we have a secret 19th century treaty shaping a region for over 100 years.
A pivotal 20th century battle that turned the tide of a world war.
Or a 21st century rocket launch that opened up a new frontier for private enterprise.
It's quite a spread, isn't it? And the sources really underline that the impact of each wasn't just limited to that single day.
No, the consequences stretched out for decades, even centuries in the case of Cyprus. They show the sheer diversity and the weight of these historical moments.
What's really fascinating, I think, is just seeing how one calendar date can link these incredibly different yet profoundly impactful events.
It makes you think, doesn't it, about all the other dates on the calendar, if you dig beneath the surface of the really famous ones.
Yeah. How many other ordinary days might hold these hidden connections, these diverse stories of significant change, just waiting for someone to piece them together?
Something for you to ponder, definitely. How seemingly unconnected...
Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more history daily.